In Financial Peace University, Dave teaches us to hate debt. Now, he does give us some examples of just how much debt costs us, and he does give us the correct order in which to do things through the baby steps, but he doesn't explain in detail why we are to do things in a certain way, or how much certain decisions may actually cost us. This presentation takes a look at the true cost of debt as it pertains to a home mortgage. This scenario assumes a few things, so let's go through it. With a loan amount of $240,000, which is 80% of 300,000. What that means is, the average cost of a home in Maryland is $300,000, and since we're going to put 20% down to avoid our PMI, we're going to borrow $240,000. And then we have to pay taxes on our home. So the Maryland property tax rate is 0.87. Okay, I didn't make that up. That's the actual tax rate. So given this, we're going to look at the difference between a 30-year and a 15-year mortgage. And the way those are primarily going to differ is through the interest rate. You're going to get about a 3% on a conventional loan, about a 3% on a 15-year, and about a 4% on a 30-year. And again, these are averages. So here's our monthly payment. We're paying $13.64 on the 30 and $18.75 for the 15. Now, it's not the reason why it's not double, okay, is because we're not paying double everything. We're only paying double on the principal. And so a mortgage payment, there are three components to it. The principal, which is you're just paying back the amount of money that you borrowed, and then you have the interest, basically what the bank charged you for borrowing that amount of money, and then you have your escrow or your taxes. The way that works is the bank will keep a portion of your mortgage in an account, and then twice a year, once a year, depending on how you set it up, they'll send it back to you so that you can send that money to the state to pay for your property taxes. Again, that's called an escrow account. So those are the three components of a mortgage. And if you get a 15-year versus a 30, you're paying more on the principal, but you're not paying more taxes and you're not paying more interest. So let's look at so what do you guys think the difference is going to be after 30 years, or how much total interest will both of these scenarios have paid? How much more is one versus the other? And how much total have you paid, not including taxes, between the two of them? And then how much did that actually cost you? Let's take a look. So for the 30-year mortgage, we paid $172,000 in interest only. For the 15-year, we paid $58,000 in interest, bringing our total of all non-tax payments, this is how much we paid for taxes in both cases, to $412,000 for the 30 and $298,000 for the 15-year. So that's a savings, just going from one to the other. That's $100,000 right there in difference. We borrowed the same amount of money, and we paid it back in half the time, and that's why we were able to save, in quotes, save $100,000 between the two scenarios. And then look at the actual interest rate on this money too. So I'm not going to go into detail how an annual percentage rate, an APR, is calculated, but it's not 4%, as you can see here. For every dollar that you borrowed, it cost you $1.42. That's how much you had to pay back. Over here, if you borrowed a dollar, you had to pay back $1.20. So this 1% difference in interest rate is extremely significant here. What that means is get a better interest rate at all costs, okay? You should get a better interest rate by reducing the term and borrow as little as possible, okay? But on a conventional loan, the absolute easiest and best way to reduce your interest rate is to shorten the term, okay? So 1% difference in interest rate in this scenario equals $100,000 in savings. Now let's look at the relationship between paying your mortgage and then also investing for retirement, okay? So we use the same two scenarios, 30-year and a 15-year, same monthly payments. What we're going to do is, if these couples had $2,000 total to pay their mortgage and to invest for their retirement, what would that look like? Okay, So in this case, they had their monthly payment. They're paying 1364, which leaves them $636 a month to put into retirement. Over here on the 15 year, for the first 15 years, because after 15 years their mortgage is done and closed. For the first 15 years, they're paying this much a month, 1875, and they have $125 left over that they can invest. And then for the second 15 years, they're going to invest all of it. So they still have to pay taxes. So after taxes, they're investing about $1,800 a month, bringing their total contributions to 229,000 for the 30 year and 340,000 for the 15 year. The 15 year invested over $100,000 more. So what does that look like after 30 years? Who did better and by how much? Surprisingly, at least to me, the first time I saw it, the 30-year mortgage they did much better. In fact, they have an additional $650,000. Um, and the reason why is because they started early. If you remember from week one, Dave showed us a slide, a presentation, a scenario where there were two guys. I don't remember their names. We'll call them John and Steve. Where John, he saved $1,000 for retirement every year from age 17 to 27, and Steve, he saved $1,000 for retirement every year from age 27 to 67. And then it looked at how much money they had at age 67 in both cases. And John or Steve never caught up to John, even though he invested a lot more money. Because John invested early, he ended up doing better. Okay, and this is another illustration of that, how compound interest works, and the earlier you get in, the better. Okay, so even though they invested $100,000 less, they ended up with over $600,000 more. So what's our conclusion here? Do the baby steps in order. Okay, getting a better interest rate and borrowing as little as possible is the best way to save money on the loan. That's what we learned in the last slide. However, it's more important to invest 15% of your income for retirement. This is why baby step 4, investing 15% of your total household income for retirement, comes before paying off your mortgage. I want to look at one more thing. Let's look at, like what would happen if we paid these off early. Okay, so we're going to pay both of these off in half the time. We're going to pay the 30-year off in 15. We're going to pay the 15-year off in 7.5. Okay, so here are our new monthly payments, and the reason they didn't double because we're not paying double interest and we're not paying double taxes. So, given this, these are our new interest paid. Okay, we're paying about $80,000 on the 30-year in 15, and we're paying about $40,000 on the 15-year in 7.5. And if we go back a few slides, we can compare that. So $80,000 in interest on the 30-year if we paid off in half the time. And this is $172,000 if we just paid it off regular. So we're saving about $100,000 here in this case. And then we have savings over here too. So that's good. Saving is good. We want our money. We don't want to give it to the bank. The thing I really want to show you though is this number. Okay, the total of all non-tax payments. If you compare it to this number, which is how much the total non-tax payment on the 15-year in 15 years was, it was this. It was $298,000. So even though we paid this one off in the same amount of time, we paid the 30-year off in 15 versus the 15-year off in 15. It still cost us about $20,000 to do it this way, and that's because the interest rate is still higher. So even though you're paying it off in half the time, you're still paying it at 4% rather than at 3%. And another thing to consider here is that these people paid double every month for 15 years. That's a pretty incredible level of discipline. As Dave has taught us, behavior and discipline is 80% of success in financial peace, and like knowledge and math, that's only 20%. And if these people had taken some months off if they had wanted to go on a vacation, or they had an emergency and they didn't want to dip into their emergency fund. They just said, "Hey, we just won't pay double on our mortgage this month." Then this number would be even greater. It'd be a lot greater. So even with perfect discipline, it costs this couple about $20,000 to do it this way. Okay. Conclusion being, a 15-year mortgage is just objectively better than a 30 in every way. There's just no reason to get a 30 when you can get a 15-year instead. Okay. Um, Getting a 30-year mortgage and planning on paying it off early, even if you can afford the 15, is unwise. It would still cost you more money. So let's look at just kind of some grand conclusions here, okay? Um, so, look, obviously, the absolute best way to save money when buying a house is to put 100% down and have no interest, okay? But I recognize that that's very unrealistic, okay? So let's look at some things that we want to keep in mind in order of importance to maximize our wealth. Okay, so the first thing, we absolutely have to be able to invest 15% of our income for retirement after we get our mortgage. That is vitally important. Okay, this was the slide that saved us over $500,000. This information saves us $500,000 right here. If you can't do this, then you're not ready to buy. Okay. The next thing that we want to do, we want to get a 15-year mortgage rather than a 30. Okay, and that's for the better interest rate. And this slide is the one that saved us about $100,000. So if you can't do these two things, then you're not ready to buy. Okay, you got to go back to your budget, or you need to find a better deal. Get a smaller house, or increase your income in some way, because $500,000 here, not worth it. $100,000 here, not worth it. Okay. Take some time and get yourself ready. Okay, get yourself prepared to do this the right way. I want to take now we're here. I want to take a minute and I want to talk about private mortgage insurance. So PMI is insurance. It's for the bank. It's not for you in case that you default, and you have to pay PMI if you do not put at least 20% down. And PMI generally, the amount of money it costs, it's about 1%. Like it would be about like having an extra 1% on the APR. So, and then in addition to that, it'll come off after you have paid 22% of the value of the loan down. You can call the bank and you can get it dropped off. Okay, you can get it removed. So number one, it's about 1% difference, and number two, if you do things right, you should only, if you have to have it, you should only have it for a few years, and then you're paying off that loan, and then you can get that dropped. Okay, it's not that vitally important to avoid the PMI if you're a first-time home buyer and you're currently renting. Okay, because the amount of money that PMI costs you is likely less than you're paying in rent. Okay. And this Dave says this too. I'm not making this up. This is Dave knowledge here. Now, if you are already in a home where you're paying a mortgage, or you're living somewhere rent free, it's definitely better, and you should wait, and you should make sure that you have a significant enough down payment to pay that, or to avoid the PMI. But otherwise, it might actually save you money to have the PMI and stop spending so much money on rent. So that's our next thing in order here. Put a minimum of 20% down to avoid the PMI, because it's your money. You don't want to give it to the bank. If you don't default, they don't give it back. They keep that. So we want to keep that money. That's our money. And then the last thing is, baby step 6. Okay, pay extra until your mortgage is gone. And this is the only order that you should consider when you think you're ready to buy a house. You have to do things in this order. Okay. I hope this was really helpful for you guys, and I hope it kind of illustrates how much debt can actually cost you. Because remember, it's like Dave says, poor people ask how much a month, rich people say how much. So this is how much it's costing you to do things in these ways. So again, I hope it was helpful, and good luck.